Ford fell more than 3%. General Motors fell more than 6%.
Stellantis has announced that it will be offering buyouts to eligible employees soon.
There's a lot of uncertainty with some of the issues related to regulation and tariff.
The new tariff designed to save American automakers may end up sinking them instead. In a shocking twist, the federal government's attempt to safeguard domestic car production has unleashed unintended consequences. 25% duties on vehicles and parts have taken effect retroactively from April 3, 2025, blindsiding manufacturers and forcing them to pay hefty fines on cars already in transit. This policy, touted as a grand display of national pride, has quickly become the source of global tension. Legacy Detroit giants, Ford, General Motors, and Stellantis, find themselves scrambling to handle immediate financial shocks and rethinking decades of cross-border production. Meanwhile, foreign brands appear less rattled, with their robust stateside plants acting as buffers against these harsh new levies. Prominent analysts warn that these escalating costs may spark the largest automotive trade war in modern history. Will this protectionist move resurrect American manufacturing dominance, or is it the prelude to an economic chain reaction destined to upend the car industry worldwide? Stick around, because the fallout from these tariffs might rewrite the rules of global auto production in a matter of weeks.
The ambition of these measures is enormous. The effects on the global economy will be monumental.
At the heart of this conflict lies a bold and controversial policy: an across-the-board 25% tariff on imported vehicles and parts. Initially framed as a measure to protect American jobs, the reality is far more complex. Instead of arriving as a routine customs fee, these tariffs retroactively strike shipments that crossed borders after April 3rd, plunging the big three automakers into a legal and financial quagmire. Stockpiled cars sitting on lots face unexpected levies, while unfinished vehicles in transit risk indefinite holdups at the ports. The stakes are massive. According to recent data, the Big Three collectively sold nearly 1.85 million imported vehicles in the United States in the year 2024. Ironically, a segment that now falls squarely into the crosshairs of the new tariff. With production patterns locked in years ago under the assumption of steady cross-border flows, these companies are forced to absorb sky-high duties with no immediate relief. Meanwhile, foreign competitors like Toyota and BMW enjoy a softer landing thanks to their already robust assembly plants in South Carolina, Alabama, Indiana, and beyond. Even more disconcerting is the upcoming May 3rd deadline, when parts tariffs officially kick in. Industry voices caution that this phase could deal an even graver blow, especially if the rules around USMCA compliance remain murky. Canadian and Mexican officials are calling the policy a betrayal of trust.
President Trump again imposed unjustified tariffs on our nation,
insisting that the integrated North American auto market should remain exempt from punitive measures. With tensions mounting, the scene is set for an unpredictable economic standoff, one side touting national security concerns, and the other pointing to decades of mutual cooperation and shared success. Still, the question lingers. Is this abrupt tariff regime truly ushering in a new era of American production, or is it spurring a series of profit-killing surprises no one saw coming? The conflict boils down to a single urgent dilemma: protect domestic factories at all costs, or maintain open borders that many say have helped the industry flourish in the modern age. At the forefront of the turmoil stand the big three American powerhouses. Ford, General Motors, and Stellantis exemplify the very institutions the tariff claims to defend. Each maintains considerable production lines in Canada and Mexico, arrangements once hailed as savvy expansions that lowered labor costs and maximized competitiveness. Ford builds its popular Bronco Sport and Maverick pickup in Mexico, while General Motors recently shifted its Silverado electric vehicle assembly to Canada. Stellantis, meanwhile, has for years balanced Jeep and Ram truck production between American, Canadian, and Mexican plants. These intricate supply webs are now being ripped apart in a matter of weeks. Recent developments only deepen the tension. Stellantis announced an alarming 70% drop in net income for the first quarter of 2025, down to $5.7 billion. This precipitous decline correlates with abrupt supply chain interruptions and newly imposed duties. Analysts from S&P Global Mobility warn that unless policy changes or carve-outs emerge, the 25% tariff could hold firm through the end of the year. The financial repercussions are catastrophic. Brace yourself for more potential cost-cutting measures, from layoffs to halting certain model lines. Foreign automakers represent another major contingent. Japanese firms such as Honda, Toyota, and Nissan are somewhat shielded by their heavy investment in American production facilities, particularly in the Midwestern and Southern states. Honda recently announced a $300 million expansion of its Ohio plants, underscoring a strategy of ramping up domestic capacity. For these companies, the conflict may be less a crisis and more an opportunity. If they keep building vehicles locally, they sidestep the brunt of the tariffs altogether. European manufacturers, notably BMW and Mercedes-Benz, have followed a similar path. With each brand operating substantial assembly lines in the United States, their exposure to the new import duties is far less severe. Meanwhile, Jaguar Land Rover offered a glimpse of an alternative strategy, pausing exports to the United States shortly after the tariff announcement. The resulting drop in availability could pressure buyers to consider domestically built vehicles from foreign nameplates. Canada, Mexico, and the European Union represent the political heavyweights, threatening countermeasures that could morph this into a multi-front trade war. Their frustration is fueled by what they consider an unfair rewriting of trade partnerships. Speculation abounds that the EU may target American tech giants with an anti-coercion mechanism. Canada and Mexico, bound to the United States through the USMCA, insist the arrangement should protect them from blanket tariffs. But as of now, Washington has offered no long-term exemptions. The shockwaves extend well beyond North America's borders. In the European Union, leaders see the new tariff as an economic provocation with wide-ranging consequences, hinting at digital service taxes and other retaliatory actions aimed at leading American tech corporations. Several experts recalled dire warnings from earlier crises, suggesting that auto-centric conflicts can be as disruptive as the 2008 financial meltdown or the global COVID disruptions of the early 2020s. By roping in far-reaching industries, from auto parts manufacturing to software services, the stage is set for a confrontation that might damage multiple sectors simultaneously. Many automakers have turned defensive, putting shipments on hold until they can assess the impact of the new fees. Jaguar Land Rover's export pause seems to be only the tip of the iceberg. In just the last 3 days, rumors have spread about certain European luxury car makers weighing a complete pullout from the United States market if the tariff scenario worsens. Meanwhile, S&P Global Mobility analysts project that the cost structure for manufacturing has changed so drastically that chain reactions, like abrupt plant relocations, may surface. Moreover, consumer fallout looms large. With imported vehicles carrying steep price markups, the average new car sticker in the country now exceeds $48,000. As a result, buyers turn to longer financing terms, 6, 7, or even 8-year loans, to offset monthly costs. Bankers worry that households risk going underwater on these extended plans, leaving people stuck in negative equity on vehicles that depreciate faster than the loan can be paid off. The possibility of a subprime auto lending crisis is intensifying by the day. Despite the chaos, some foreign automakers have inadvertently lucked out. Because they invested in stateside production lines years ago, their supply chains remain largely contained within America's borders. That means minimal exposure to the tariffs bite, an ironic twist for a policy that was supposed to give legacy Detroit a leg up. Yet tensions run high among domestic dealerships, consumers, and government officials alike, all bracing for what might come next if Canada, Mexico, and the EU execute their threats of retaliatory fees on major American exports. Where does this leave the embattled auto sector? Eyes are focused on the looming parts tariff, scheduled to take effect on May 3, 2025. Manufacturers are rushing to secure waivers or alternative supply lines before the next wave of costs hits. If parts remain subject to the full 25% duty, even domestically assembled vehicles reliant on cross-border components could skyrocket in price. This prospect stirs concern that the protective measure will end up punishing the very consumers it aims to shield, as parts for brake systems, transmissions, and engines often come from Canadian or Mexican plants. Some automakers are pushing for accelerated reshoring, determined to shift production stateside in an attempt to dodge these punishing fees. Honda's plan to move Civic assembly to Indiana, originally targeted for 2027, may now advance to 2028, though building or updating factories is a prolonged process that costs billions. Meanwhile, Toyota's expansions in the South, along with Hyundai's increased Midwest footprint, suggest that earlier investments could pay handsome dividends. Yet an entirely different battle unfolds in the electric vehicle segment. Companies that counted on foreign battery imports now find themselves cut off from federal tax credits, which require North American manufacturing to qualify. Consumer interest in electric vehicles continues to rise, but inadequate charging infrastructure, combined with tariff-inflicted price hikes, cast doubt on any seamless transition to cleaner transportation. General Motors, once aggressive in its EV aspirations, recently scaled back production targets, citing market upheaval and the sudden spike in supply chain costs. Startups like Hyzon have already collapsed, further illustrating the volatility. Is a diplomatic compromise on the horizon? Or are we inching toward an all-out trade war that could leave North American unity in tatters? If Canada and Mexico choose to retaliate, they could strike back with tariffs on agricultural products or tech manufacturing, further slicing into American profits. The tension stands at a crossroads. Either the United States modifies its approach, or the entire region could stumble into a cycle of escalating tariffs that jeopardize countless jobs. With car prices soaring and loans lengthening, is the American dream of car ownership slipping away? The policy that promised to fortify American industry has created paradoxical ripples, shaking the very foundations it aimed to reinforce. Politicians who championed the tariff for domestic gain now face the possibility that it may spark a prolonged trade war, pulling multiple sectors into the crossfire. And if Canada, Mexico, and the European Union double down on retaliation, the conflict could leap beyond the auto sector, transforming into a full-blown economic battle across entire continents. Each passing day hints at new ramifications, from extended loan defaults to higher dealership fees, illustrating how a high-stakes policy can spiral beyond what even its most ardent supporters intended. Where does that leave the consumer rummaging through limited inventory, painfully aware that every vehicle, domestic or foreign, might have a hidden surcharge? Will diplomatic shortcuts emerge, or does this policy already have too much momentum for an easy fix? The next few weeks will be critical. If the big three survive, they may come out stronger and more independent. Or perhaps they will endure a new kind of vulnerability, bound by protectionist shackles. The automotive world waits on edge, poised to see how the dust settles in this dramatic standoff.